Doctor finds his former love in serious condition in the hospital, and something surprising happens. The surgical light shone brightly on the operating table, reflecting off the metal surfaces, and I felt at the height of my career. Adrenaline pulsed through my veins as I maneuvered the scalpel with precision. Each cut, each suture was a dance I knew by heart. The patient was in critical condition, but I was confident in my abilities. The words of my mentor, Dr. Thompson, echoed in my mind. Surgery is both an art and a science, Ethan. Keep calm, and you will be unbeatable. Blood pressure is dropping, Nurse Alice announced, with a tone of urgency that cut through the silent air of the room. I couldn't let it affect me. I took a deep breath and continued working. The room was full of assistants, all focused on the task at hand. I felt sweat running down my temple, but it wasn't just the heat from the lights. It was the pressure that came not only from the surgery, but from Dr. Thompson's expectations. He was there, watching my every move, with critical eyes and an expression that seemed to say, "I expect mistakes. Come on, Ethan," Alice encouraged, noticing my hesitation. "You can do it." I mentally thanked her, but my concentration was abruptly interrupted by an insistent ring on my cell phone, which was positioned in a corner of the table. A feeling of discomfort began to spread through me. I knew that touch was unusual during surgery. Without looking, I picked up the device and answered. "Ethan?" The voice of a colleague from the emergency room sounded on the other side. "We need you. It's an emergency. A patient is in critical condition, car accident. You must come immediately." My heart raced. What could be so serious? I looked at Dr. Thompson, who frowned, clearly annoyed. "Are you sure you can't finish the surgery before you go?" he asked, with a harshness that made me feel like a student in trouble. "I can't, Dr. Thompson. If it's an emergency, I need to go now," I replied, already getting up and putting the gloves aside. With a quick gesture, I washed my hands and headed towards the exit, the echoes of the surgery still resonating in my mind. The hospital hallway seemed longer than ever, and anxiety began to rise. What was happening? Who was this patient? Every step I took made me more restless. Arriving at the emergency room, I found a crowd of doctors and nurses. The air was thick with the smell of antiseptic, and the tension was palpable. Dr. Thompson appeared at my side, his stern gaze fixed on the frantically working team. "It's your responsibility, Ethan. You're going to have to act quickly," he said, his voice low but firm. "What do we have?" "A young woman, in critical condition, car accident, multiple fractures, and internal bleeding. We are trying to stabilize her," replied a nurse, with an expression of extreme concern. I approached the gurney, my heart pounding in my chest. When I finally looked at the patient, my world stopped. A shock wave ran through my body. It was Sarah, my ex-girlfriend. His face was pale and his eyes were closed. A ventilation tube was connected to his mouth. "No," I muttered, feeling like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. Memories began to flood my mind like a whirlwind. Sarah and I had been so happy. I remembered your laughter, the afternoon spent together, the plans we made. But these memories were interspersed with flashes of pain and separation. What happened between us? Why can't we make it work? "Ethan, concentrate." Dr. Thompson's voice brought me back to reality. "We need you here, now." I shook my head, trying to clear away the memories that threatened to paralyze me. Whatever I felt for Sarah didn't matter at that moment. She needed me. With a conscious effort, I turned my attention to the team. "Let's begin," I said, trying to hide the confusion and pain that consumed me. "We need to stabilize her before we take her to surgery." The procedures began, and I found myself acting automatically, but each movement was like a stab in my heart. As I sent orders and performed exams, I couldn't stop my thoughts from wandering back to our past. The last time I saw her, she was full of tears, and I didn't know how to comfort her. The breakup had been so abrupt, so full of misunderstandings. "Ethan," Dr. Thompson shouted, his voice sharp. "Focus." I looked away from him, realizing I was losing control of the situation. The pressure was mounting, and I felt like I needed to get back on my feet. After all, it was my responsibility to save Sarah. "I am fine," I replied, trying to steady my voice. "Let's continue." As the team worked, I couldn't shake the image of Sarah lying there. I still loved her. This was an undeniable fact. But what did that mean now? What could I do to help her? Time seemed to drag by as our voices blended in a frenzy of medical instructions and heartbeats. With each second, the gravity of the situation became more intense. What I had lost was not just love. It was a part of me that I didn't know still existed. I remembered how happy we were, how we dreamed together, and how, in the blink of an eye, everything fell apart. I had convinced myself that moving on was best, but now, standing in front of her, I realized that I had never really succeeded. "We're losing pressure," shouted a nurse. The tension in the room increased. Adrenaline coursed through my veins as I reassessed the situation. We needed to act quickly. What could I do? "Increase the fluid infusion," I ordered, while trying to concentrate. "We need to stabilize her before taking her to the surgical center." As the team followed instructions, I couldn't help but look at Sarah. What was going on in your mind? She was fighting for her life, but I was also fighting the ghosts of our past. The connection we had still existed, and at that moment, I just wanted her to look at me again with those eyes I loved so much. "Ethan," Dr. Thompson pulled me back to reality. "We need you now. We can't waste any more time." I took a deep breath, the reality of the moment sinking into my mind. It wasn't just surgery. It was a chance to save someone I still loved. And, as difficult as it was, I had to leave the past behind, at least until the situation was under control. With renewed determination, I turned to my team, ready to fight for Sarah. That was the only thing that mattered now. The heat of the operating room was oppressive, but it didn't compare to the turmoil that was forming inside me. As the medical team worked frantically around Sarah, every movement, every sound, seemed to echo as a reminder of what we had experienced together. Memories invaded my mind like an overwhelming torrent, and I struggled to stay grounded in reality. Sarah's face, pale and bruised, was a sight I never thought I'd see again. Memories of our breakup began to resonate, and I found myself back in that dark moment. Flashback. We were in a small cafe, the smell of fresh coffee and the sounds of conversation in the background. I looked into her eyes, and the pain I felt seeing her so sad was unbearable. "Ethan, we can't go on like this," she said, her voice shaking. "I need more than you can give. You're so focused on your career that you don't realize how much I'm suffering." "Sarah, I'm trying. I just want you to understand that this is important to me," I replied, but I already knew that words weren't enough. She looked at me, and for a moment, I saw the spark of hope in her eyes, but it was soon extinguished. "It's not just about you, Ethan. It's about us. We need time, and I can't wait any longer. I can't be the second option in your life." Those words echoed in my mind as I tried to focus on the surgery. Dr. Thompson was focused on the monitor, but I could feel his critical gaze in my direction. He noticed my distraction. "Harper, stay focused," he shouted, his voice harsh, breaking the tense silence in the room. "We are dealing with a life here. If you can't, maybe you should have walked away." I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to regain concentration. The memory of Sarah walking away, of her tears, of how our paths parted, cut me like a sharp blade. "I'm sorry, Dr. Thompson," I murmured, but the truth was I couldn't let go of the pain. "You need to let this go, Harper. This is not a situation you can take personally. You are a surgeon, not a romantic." His sharp voice made me open my eyes, and I looked at Sarah again, as if she could give me the strength I needed. The team continued to work, and as I did my part, the memories became more and more vivid. I remembered when we first met, at a medical conference. She was so full of life, so passionate about her profession, and I let myself be carried away by her light. I remember her laugh, the way her smile brightened up the darkest days, the way she looked at me when I asked her to be my girlfriend, full of expectation and love. "Ethan, you're going to regret this," she said once, when I was so focused on a project that I barely had time for her. "I just want you to know that I'll be here, but I can't wait forever." "You will never have to wait, Sarah. I promise I will find a balance. I just need a little more time," I remember saying. But the truth was that time hadn't been kind to us. "Stay with me, please," I murmured, almost in a whisper, as I looked at Sarah's unconscious face on the operating table. I can't lose you again. Dr. Thompson interrupted my reverie. Harper, your inactivity is delaying the procedure. Come on, focus. Time is of the essence. Yes, of course, I replied, forcing myself back to reality. The team was united and, together, we carried out the precise movements that have always been the basis of our work. I knew I needed to be strong, not just for Sarah, but for everyone around me. As the minutes dragged by, each second became an eternity. We can stabilize her, but we need to act quickly, I asked the team, my voice firmer now. They nodded, and together, we worked in unison, like a medical symphony. The pressure was mounting, but in the back of my mind, the memory of Sarah guided me. When we finally completed the procedure, a wave of relief washed over me. I looked at Dr. Thompson, who looked a little less stern but still skeptical. You did it, but it's not over yet. We need to monitor her closely, he said, his voice now calmer, as if he finally recognized my effort. Yes, I know. I'm going to stay here, I replied, my heart racing as I left the operating room and headed to the ICU. What I wanted most was to see Sarah wake up, to feel her presence again. Upon entering the ICU, the smell of disinfectant and the sound of monitors were familiar, but the scene unfolding in front of me was heartbreaking. Sarah was surrounded by machines, and even in her critical condition, I still saw her beauty. I sat next to her, holding her cold hand, and a whirlwind of emotions washed over me. Sarah, you need to go back. I can't imagine my life without you. I murmured, my voice breaking. The silence was deafening, and I was desperate for any sign of her. The medical team continued to work, but my mind was far away. What had happened between us seemed so small now, so irrelevant in the face of the fragility of life. I wished I could go back in time, right the wrongs, and tell her how much I loved her. Just when I thought hope was fading, a nurse entered the room and looked at me with compassion. Dr. Harper, she's in good hands. We are doing everything we can. You need to take care of yourself too. I know, but it's difficult. I don't know if I can, I started, but she interrupted me. You can and you should. You need to be present, not just physically, but emotionally. If you let yourself be carried away by pain, you won't be able to help anyone, not even yourself. She was right. I took a deep breath, trying to clear away the storm of feelings that was forming inside me. Thank you, I said, even though I knew words weren't enough. Time seemed to drag by as I watched Sarah, wishing she could feel my presence. The emotional chaos inside me was slowly calming, and I knew that no matter what happened, I would do everything in my power to bring her back. I still love you, Sarah, I murmured again, not knowing if she could hear. Hope and despair fought inside me, but one thing was certain. I was determined to fight for her, not just as a doctor, but as the man who still loved her more than anything in this world. The fluorescent light of the ICU was almost blinding, and the constant sound of the heart monitors was a cruel reminder of the fragility of life. I was there, next to Sarah, watching her every breath, every slight movement her body made, as if she were fighting something invisible. My heart was sinking, and I couldn't look away from her face, which now looked so pale and vulnerable. What I wouldn't give for her to be awake, looking at me with that smile that I loved so much. I remembered a sunny afternoon when we were in the park, laughing and talking about our dreams. Sarah had an infectious laugh, and every time I heard her, my worry about the world disappeared. Ethan, have you ever thought about what our life together would be like? She had asked, her eyes shining with hope. At that moment, I had no idea what was coming. I didn't know that life had other plans, that storms were inevitable, and that pain could tear us apart. I wish I'd told you I still cared, I murmured, more to myself than to her. The silence of the ICU seemed to amplify my words. I remembered the last time we met, the harsh words we exchanged, the pride that separated us. A pride that now seemed so insignificant given the gravity of the situation. Suddenly, I saw Sarah's eyes slowly open. It was as if time had stopped. I leaned closer, my heart racing. Ethan? His voice was a whisper, faint, but each syllable was like music to my ears. I'm here, Sarah. I'm here. Emotion took over me, and I almost let the tears slide. She recognized me. That little connection, even in the midst of chaos, was all I needed. Ethan, are you okay? She looked confused, like she was struggling to remember everything. I am. I'm fine. The important thing is that you're here with me now. I held her hand, and the feel of her skin against mine brought a comfort I didn't know I needed. Every beat of my heart seemed to scream that I still loved her, that there was still hope for us. But before we could delve deeper into the conversation, the ICU door opened abruptly, and Dr. Thompson entered, with that authoritative expression that always kept me on alert. Ethan, you need to step away. The patient needs a peaceful environment to recover, he said brusquely, his voice sounding like thunder amidst our fragility. She needs me, Thompson. I can't just leave. The desperation in my voice was palpable. The need to be there, next to Sarah, was stronger than any hospital rule. This isn't a question of emotion, Harper. It's a question of ethics. You're emotionally compromised, and that may affect your judgment. We need to ensure the patient's well-being, but I'm the best surgeon you have here. And besides, I'm someone who cares about her. I was losing patience, and the tension between us was almost electric. Dr. Thompson crossed his arms, his expression unwavering. You need to understand that as a doctor, you have to put your emotions aside. That's what makes a good doctor. Now step back. I felt a knot form in my stomach. The reality of the situation hit me like a punch. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to leave her alone. Just one more minute, please, I asked, turning my gaze to Sarah, who now looked confused and scared. Just a minute, and I promise I'll step aside. She looked at me with concern, as if she could read what I was feeling. Ethan, it's okay. I just need a moment. Dr. Thompson hesitated, but his gaze was steady. You have to understand, Ethan. It's not just about you and Sarah. It's about the team, the surgery that just happened. You need to step aside so we can take care of her without distractions. You don't understand. I screamed, frustration boiling over. She's more than a patient to me. I can't just leave her. We need to be rational, Ethan. And you're not. His voice was calm, but I knew that for him this was a control issue. He was more concerned with maintaining order than understanding what I was going through. I won't walk away. My voice was steady, even though I knew I was putting my career at risk. Thompson stepped forward, his gaze piercing. You think this is easy for me? I'm human too, but you're putting your feelings above her health. Think about what you're doing. I looked at Sarah again and saw the pain in her eyes. I just want to be here for you, Sarah. That's all I want. She smiled slightly, but soon the expression of pain took over her face. Ethan, I don't want you to get hurt because of me. I'll be fine. No, you won't. I can't let this happen. You need me. I can't walk away. The intensity of the situation was consuming me. Every word I spoke was like a cry of despair, a plea for everything to be okay. Dr. Thompson took a deep breath, as if trying to find a way to control the situation. I can't allow you to stay here. It's a matter of protocol. Protocol? Do you really think this is about protocol? I was about to explode. It's about love. It's about what we were, about what we could be. I can't miss the chance to be by her side, even if it's just for a moment. One moment could cost her life, Ethan. Thompson retorted, his voice raised. Then let me stay. I promise I'll behave. I'll be professional, but please don't take me away from her. The plea in my tone was clear. I didn't want to fight, but I was at my limit. The tension between us was palpable, and I realized that the only thing that could keep me going were the memories I held of Sarah. The laughter, the deep conversations, the moments of affection that now seemed so far away. I couldn't let all of this go to waste. Sarah, I'm here. I'll fight for you, like you always did for me, I whispered, as Dr. Thompson walked away, still giving her dubious looks. At that moment, I realized that the fight was not just for her life, but for the chance to rebuild something that should never have been destroyed. And most of all, I wasn't going to give up. The emergency room was in an almost deafening frenzy. The sound of beeping monitors and the hurried murmur of medical staff filled the room, but my mind was in a completely different place. I tried hard to stay calm, but the emotional turmoil that had come with seeing Sarah left me on the verge of collapse. My mind whirled between memories of our past, moments that I tried to bury, but that now came back with a vengeance. "Dr. Harper, we need your attention here." A nurse pulled me back to reality, and I focused on the situation. Sarah was in critical condition, and I couldn't afford to be distracted. Dr. Thompson's words rang in my head. He didn't believe I was capable of handling the situation, and this doubt bothered me deeply. "She needs you, Ethan. Don't abandon her," I muttered to myself, as I adjusted my gloves and prepared for the next step in the treatment. The smell of disinfectant was thick in the air, and the pressure seemed to increase by the second. I looked at Sarah, so pale and vulnerable, and my heart broke. "Come on, team, we need to stabilize her," I said, trying to inject confidence into those around me. The team began working with renewed focus, and I let the adrenaline carry me away. Every maneuver I made, every decision I made, reminded me of what I had lost. The thought that I might fail again consumed me, but I couldn't allow that to happen. Time seemed to drag by as the surgery continued. My mind fluctuated between the present and the past, and I couldn't shake the memories of Sarah on those sunny mornings when we used to walk together in the park. Her laugh, the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about her dreams, all of it was like a knife in my heart. "Dr. Harper," blood pressure dropping. The nurse's voice brought me back, and I focused again. Increase fluid infusion. The team worked in almost magical synchronization, but the feeling of helplessness was overwhelming. I clearly remembered the day we broke up, the way I couldn't protect her from the pain that life imposed on her, how I let fear and insecurity tear us apart. Now here I was, in a situation where I could lose the only person I ever truly loved. The pressure increased once again as I realized complications were piling up. Sarah was struggling, and I needed to be the support she always wanted. The team was starting to feel exhausted, but I couldn't let that affect my performance. I couldn't fail. "Dr. Harper, is everything okay?" A friendly nurse, Anna, approached as I walked away from the operating table. She noticed the tension on my face and leaned in to speak to me. "You need to take care of yourself too. This is really heavy." "I know," I replied, running my hands through my hair, trying to organize my thoughts. "But I can't help but think about what could happen if I don't do enough." Anna's look was understanding. "You're doing your best, and that's all you can do. Remember, you're not alone." I nodded, but doubt still hovered over me. How could I be there for Sarah if memories of our past tormented me? I needed to confront this, but I didn't know how. Hours passed, and finally the surgery was a success. However, the feeling of relief was brief, as Sarah's situation was still critical. Upon entering the ICU, I saw his fragile body connected to a multitude of monitors and tubes. My heart sank again. I wanted to be by her side, but Dr. Thompson's presence stopped me. "Ethan," he said, his authoritative voice echoing through the space. "You must stay away. Let the team take care of her. Your presence may interfere with her recovery." "She needs me, Dr. Thompson," I protested, my voice thick with emotion. "I can't just stay away from her right now. You need to be professional. This is not the time to get carried away by emotions. You could put her life and career at risk." He was right, but that didn't make the situation any easier. How could I be professional when all I wanted was to be there for Sarah, holding her hand and telling her everything was okay? "I have to try," I muttered, almost to myself. As I looked at Sarah, I knew I needed to do something. I couldn't leave her alone to face this difficult time. The idea that she was fighting for her life without knowing how much I still cared tormented me. "Dr. Harper, you'd better leave," Dr. Thompson insisted, but I felt a determination rise within me. I couldn't just walk away. I needed to face not only Sarah's situation, but also my own demons. "Excuse me," I said, deciding I wouldn't let his words intimidate me. I left the ICU and looked for a calmer place to reflect. The hospital hallway was empty, and I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. That's when Anna appeared again. "Ethan, you need to calm down. This isn't going to help Sarah," she said, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. "I know, Anna, but it's so hard. I can't get Sarah out of my head. What happened between us? I still feel guilty." "You can't change the past, but you can do something now. Talk to her when you get the chance. She needs to know you're here." Those words echoed in my mind. I needed to talk to Sarah. I needed her to know that I still cared. Even if Dr. Thompson told me otherwise, I couldn't allow fear to paralyze me again. "You're right," I said, standing up with new determination. "I need to do this. I can't risk losing the chance to tell her how I feel." With a new goal in mind, I returned to the ICU. The sight of Sarah, still so fragile, made my heart race. I knew I needed to find the courage to face not only the current situation, but also the unresolved issues between us. "Hi, Sarah," I said, holding her hand gently. "I'm here. I won't leave you alone." The silence of the room seemed to be a comfort, and I hoped that, somehow, she could sense my presence. I was ready to face the past, no matter what that meant. The ICU room was enveloped in tense silence, interrupted only by the soft beeping of monitors that followed Sarah's breathing. I was there, by her side, with my hand wrapped in hers, feeling the fragility of her life. Deep in my heart, I still wondered how we got here. After the surgery, the hours dragged by, and every minute felt like a century. Even in the midst of all the chaos, there was a moment when everything quieted down, as if time had stopped to allow me to speak to her. "Sarah," I began, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're stronger now." I've been thinking about us, about everything that happened." I looked at her pale face, wishing she could open her eyes and see how much I still cared. What I really wanted was for her to feel the same. His face was marked by pain, but even so, there was a beauty that reminded me of the days when we were together, laughing and dreaming. The connection was still there, pulsing between us, but I knew I had to be careful. "Please don't leave me alone in this," she said, her voice weak, almost an echo. I don't know what to do." "You're not alone, Sarah. I'm here. I always will be. I miss you so much," I replied, feeling tears welling up in my eyes. "I never stopped loving you." She turned her head slowly, trying to focus on me. Her gaze was confused, as if she were fighting her own demons. "Ethan, this is complicated. I don't know if I'm the same as before. I don't know if I can be the same. You don't have to be the same. We can figure this out together. I just want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what." She closed her eyes again, a pained expression crossing her face. "What if I told you that there are things you don't know? Things that led me to make decisions that drove us apart?" My heart raced. "Sarah, please tell me. I need to know. We need to face this together. We can't go on like this, with secrets between us." Her hesitation was palpable, and I could feel the tension in the air. I don't know if I'm ready for this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm afraid of what you'll think. You can tell me anything, and I promise I'll be by your side. No matter how hard it is, I want to understand." She shook her head slowly, as if fighting an invisible current. "Ethan, I don't know if I can give you that certainty. There are things I've done, things that could change everything for us. So tell me, please." My voice was full of urgency, but also gentleness. "You're still the woman I loved. We can still be a team, just like before." The silence dragged on, and I could almost hear her thoughts thrashing around in her mind. Meanwhile, the ICU door opened, and Dr. Thompson walked in, his imposing presence filling the space. He gave me a stern look, as if he knew I was overstepping my bounds. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice resonating with authority. "You shouldn't be so close to the patient. It's a violation of guidelines." "She needs me, Dr. Thompson," I replied, without looking away. "Sarah needs emotional support, and I can't just walk away from her." "You are compromising your objectivity as a doctor. We cannot allow your emotions to interfere with her treatment," he insisted, crossing his arms. "You're risking your career, Ethan." "My career doesn't matter. What matters is Sarah. I can't leave her alone in this difficult time," I retorted, feeling adrenaline course through my body. "If you can't understand that, maybe you're not the right person to lead this team." "What are you saying? You're putting your career on the line for a patient?" "That's reckless," he replied, his voice becoming colder. "I'm giving you one last chance to walk away. I don't want to see you put everything in danger. I'm not going to walk away, I stated, challenging him. The love I feel for Sarah is worth any risk. I know I can help her, and I won't give up on her. Dr. Thompson took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on me. To him, I was just another doctor on the team, but to me, Sarah was everything. She was the reason I was willing to fight any barrier, any obstacle that came my way. You're becoming a problem, Ethan. If you don't back off, I'll have no choice but to take drastic action, he threatened. But I didn't care. I just wanted Sarah to know that I was there for her, no matter the consequences. I'm not going to walk away, I repeated, my voice firm. If that means you're going to fire me or take some action against me, then so be it. He turned, clearly frustrated, and walked out of the ICU, leaving me alone with Sarah again. The silence that followed was heavy, but I felt more determined than ever. I looked at her, who was still struggling to find the words. Sarah, I don't know what the future holds, but I want to face it with you. No matter what you've done, I'm still here. I still love you. She slowly opened her eyes, and I could see tears forming. Ethan, you don't need to say anything right now, but when you're ready, I'll be here. As I held her hand, feeling life pulsing, I realized that I was ready to face any challenge that came. The love he felt for Sarah was stronger than any rule, any threat. I was not only fighting for her life, but also for the chance at a new beginning, for a future we could still have together. The light in the ICU flickered softly, as if it were dancing to the rhythm of Sarah's heartbeat. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding his cold hand in mine, feeling as if time had stopped. The smell of disinfectant and the constant sound of monitors had almost become a familiar symphony, but the pain in my chest was new and intense. After so many hours of surgery and uncertainty, there was finally a chance that she would recover. But there was something else I needed to know. Sarah opened her eyes slowly, fighting the fog of anesthesia. When his eyes met mine, a mix of recognition and confusion reflected in his gaze. Ethan? Her voice was weak, but there was an underlying strength that I had always admired. I'm here, Sarah. I'm with you. Those words came out of me like a promise, a silent commitment that I wouldn't leave his side again. She tried to smile, but the expression soon turned into a pained grimace. What happened? His voice was a whisper, as if speaking was an effort. You had an accident, but you're safe now. We're taking care of you. I tried to remain calm, but the truth was that I was terrified. The thought of losing Sarah once again made me uneasy, and I couldn't bear it. I remember. She hesitated, as if she was struggling to organize her thoughts. I didn't mean. My heart raced. Didn't want what, Sarah? You can tell me. I needed to understand. The urgency of the situation pushed me to insist, even though I knew she was in a vulnerable state. I didn't want you to know. Her words were a whisper, barely audible. I didn't want to involve you in something that you couldn't handle. Involve in what? I was about to lose my patience, but I saw her so fragile that I held on. Sarah, please, you need to tell me. What's going on? I was pregnant when we split up. Her words fell like a bomb between us. The air became heavy, and I felt my heart stop for a moment. I couldn't tell you. I thought it would be better this way. I thought that you couldn't handle the responsibility. Hearing this, a wave of emotions washed over me. A mixture of joy and sadness invaded my being. Was I going to be a father? The idea was so monumental that I could barely process it. You were pregnant? Sarah, why didn't you tell me? We could have gotten through this together. Frustration came through in my voice, but at the same time, there was a deep understanding of the fear that had led her to make such a decision. I didn't want to trap you in something I couldn't guarantee. I didn't know what my life would be like after the breakup. I didn't want you to feel like you needed to take care of me. Tears streamed down her face, and my heart broke seeing her suffering. You never trapped me, Sarah. I love you. Always have. The sincerity of my confession echoed in the room, and for a moment, the barriers that separated us seemed to crumble. If I had known you were pregnant, I would have done everything differently. I don't know if you could have done that, Ethan. I didn't want to hurt you more. I didn't want you to feel guilty about something that wasn't your fault. That conversation was consuming me, but there was a clarity that was being restored amidst the chaos. But now you're here, and we can work through this together. You're not alone, Sarah. You never have been. Her expression changed from pain to a glimmer of hope. Do you still love me, even after all this? Even after the breakup? Yes, I love you. And now, more than before. I want you to know that I'm here, not just for you, but for our son too. If you'll let me, I want to be a part of your lives. She closed her eyes, and I saw a tear slide down her cheek. Ethan, I don't know what the future holds. I'm afraid. I'm scared too. But we can't let it control us. We'll face this together. You're healing, and I'll be by your side every step of the way. Promise. The tone of her voice was a mix of hope and distrust, but I couldn't fail her again. I promise. I swore, and that promise became a new bond between us. A bond that transcended the past and united us in an uncertain but love-filled future. Sarah's recovery was slow, but with each passing day, she became stronger. I was there, by her side, not just as a doctor, but as a man who wanted to fill the void that once separated us. We talked about everything. About what could have been, about the mistakes we made, and about what it meant to be a family. One morning, as the sun filtered through the window, illuminating the ICU room, Sarah smiled at me with a sparkle in her eyes that I hadn't seen in years. Ethan, I want you to be there when our son is born. My heart raced at the idea. Of course, I wouldn't be anywhere else. I know it won't be easy. We still have a lot to face. But together, we can do this. I won't leave you alone again. And so, as Sarah recovered, we began to dream together again. The future was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. The love we felt for each other was stronger than any obstacle we could face. When she was finally discharged, we left the hospital hand in hand, ready to face the world and everything it had in store for us. I'm with you, Sarah. Forever, I said, looking into his eyes, and in that moment, I knew we were ready to be a family.